Welcome to Essential Drawing. Space, an element of art. It refers to depth in a 2D work of art and creates an illusion. Objectives: to learn 5 of the 6 spatial devices used in drawing, and to isolate each of these 5 for greater understanding. You will need a pencil, an eraser, and drawing paper. Let's begin. We'll start by creating 5 small picture planes on this one sheet of drawing paper. Across the top of our page, draw 3 portrait orientation rectangles. That is, 3 rectangles that are taller than they are wide. And along the bottom row, draw 2 rectangles, landscape orientation, wider than they are tall. In each of these 5 boxes, we'll isolate one way to create distance or depth between objects. In the first box, I've drawn a circle and a square, or at least most of a square. Part of the square is obscured behind the circle. Additionally, there are 2 lines next to the square that are in line with one another and appear to go behind the square. Anytime we can use words like behind to describe a relationship, we've created space. Our first device is overlapping. To illustrate our second spatial device, we'll draw a person, just a diagram of a person. The 3 lines that you see along the left side of this second picture plane are to identify where the head will top out, where the feet will be, and where the waistline is, just so that my diagram of a person is near the proportions of an average person. We've drawn the person out of simple shapes like trapezoids and ovals. I'll go ahead and extend the headline out next to our first person and draw a second person. For the second person, using the same proportions, we want the feet to stop at about the level of our first person's knees. Same proportions, head in the same place. The difference is one is larger than the other. Size, or scale, is our second spatial device. For our third spatial device, we will purposefully avoid the use of scale, that is, one object being larger or smaller than another object, and draw 2 houses, one in the bottom left corner and one in the top right corner of our third picture plane. I'm going to add a roof to these little houses with points to illustrate that this spatial device was more common in years past in Asia, particularly China and Korea, and to a lesser extent Japan. Often, ancient and medieval Chinese and Korean artists would illustrate space or create space by using placement on the page and not using scale. So the house on the bottom should appear as though it's closer to us than the house at the top, even though they're the same size. Lower on the page equals closer, 90% of the time. We can see that with the circle in the overlapped picture plane. We can see that with person number 1's feet being lower in the second picture plane, and then of course the small houses. In the fourth picture plane, I've already started a drawing of a conifer, a cone-bearing tree, an evergreen. I've scribbled the value and scribbled a little darker on its right side so that it appears to have some rough texture. There's also a slight indication of form, given that there is a darker side to this tree. If you're following along, draw a rough horizon line slightly above and behind our first tree, and then on top of, or even, if you will, behind that horizon line, shade in the shape of 3 more trees of the same variety. Do not shade a darker side, and do not scribble so that the value is smoother. For the trees that are farther away, we're trying to leave out the texture, which can sometimes be interpreted as a detail. Also, there are more smaller marks closer or lower on the page on the ground than there are farther away, as if we can see more detail in the grass below the trees. Sometimes, to create more space or depth in a work of art, we can have details in the foreground and less so in the background, or even the converse. You can have detail in the background and then a blurry foreground. Either way, you would create a separation in terms of space. In our 5th and final picture plane, I'm just going to draw some wavy, irregular lines in a horizontal direction across our picture plane, just the bottom half, and shade those in, color those in so that the shape on the bottom is darkest. The second shape created by the wavy lines is a little bit lighter, and the third lighter still. This illustrates how great distance changes the colors and the values we see so that they're lighter. And if we were drawing with a color pencil, the mountain range that's farthest away would also be the least colorful. It would be gray. Those in the middle more of a blue or blue-green, and then the closer mountain range green. This is called atmospheric perspective, and it specifically uses value and sometimes color to show distance. I hope you've enjoyed Essential Drawing on Space.